Good evening, everybody, and welcome to everybody who's tuning in to another episode of Conservation Conversations. It is going to be a very exciting episode that lies in store for us this evening. I am going to, before we address the housekeeping, just show you one more video from Shamiso Banda, who is unfortunately unable to join us this evening, but who is the co-author of the book Birds on the Brink. Of course, Dr. Alan Lee being the co-author and him being here this evening representing the two of them. So before we go ahead and without further ado, a quick video just to kick the evening off on a high note.
Hi everyone! Although I'm traveling this evening and couldn't be here with you live, a big part of my heart is here with you. I love a gathering of people who care about birds and conservation, and by extension, care about the beauty and the health of our world. Spaces like this are so important for growing and spreading a culture of care and collaboration. So I do love them. To everyone getting the book, please do enjoy the read, and I look forward to meeting at least some of you at one of the launch events next month. Now, I'm sure Alan would have already thanked all of the contributors, but please do allow me to repeat that. I met so many lovely people while doing my part for the book, and I just like to thank them for doing their part as well. Okay, that's all from me for now, but please do enjoy the rest of your evening.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, everybody. And for those who've perhaps just joined in the interim, that was Shamiso Banda, the co-author of Birds on the Brink, which is obviously the hot topic for tonight's episode of Conservation Conversations. And if you happen to find yourself having tuned into this webinar, unsure as to what exactly is going on, well, you are here attending an episode of Conservation Conversations, Season 6, Episode 18, to be precise. And we will be talking about birds on the brink, South Africa's threatened bird species, and those who are working to save them. And it's a fantastic, fantastic publication, and it's very great that we have Dr. Alan Lee here this evening who will be chatting to us about it all. Joining us. Assisting me this evening is Jessica Wilmot, also co-host of Conservation Conversations, and she is on tech support. She's busy getting the slides operating in the background there, so that it's one less thing for uh, us to worry about. As I mentioned, this is season 6, episode 18. So that means that there is an entire 17 other seasons. Apologies. Five other seasons for you to catch up on. And you can do that obviously by making sure that you follow us on our social media platforms. You can let us know what you think, and you can catch up on the YouTube channel as well, BirdLife South Africa. But please do let us know what you think, and follow us on all these platforms. And as I've mentioned, YouTube is the way to go. Head over BirdLife South Africa into the tube that is you, and you simply subscribe and make sure that you're following us so that you don't miss out on any of our recordings. And they are up generally the following morning, nice and quickly. Now, we do this free of charge, everybody. So it is a service that we're providing to the birding community, and we're ecstatic to see that everybody enjoys it. If you feel so way inclined as to make any kind of a donation towards the Conservation Conversations team, then please scan the QR code that is up on your screen now. Any form of donation would be greatly appreciated. But without further ado, the housekeeping now done. A massive welcome to Dr. Alan Lee, our Science and Innovation Program Manager here at BirdLife South Africa, who is also the co-author of this remarkable publication, Birds on the Brink. And tonight's topic, South Africa's threatened bird species and those working to save them. Now, Dr. Alan Lee is by no means a unfamiliar face and personality within the birding community. He is a scientist, but passionate conservationist at heart. He, as like I've mentioned, is currently the Science and Innovation Program Manager at BirdLife South Africa. but has also served as the editor-in-chief of the Ostrich Journal of African Ornithology. He is a research associate at the Fitzpatrick Institute at UCT, and he's conducted postdoctoral research on fynbos birds and the impact of climate change. His notable publication record and has utilized citizen science as an important tool in his research. And also, most noticeably, he has led the regional red listing project, which has been hours and hours, if not days, months of hard work, culminating all of the important data into ultimately the Red Data Book of Birds of South Africa, Lesotho and Eswatini, which is available online. It is free, and you can follow that or get to that website rather by going straight to the BirdLife South Africa website to see exactly the state of South Africa's birds. Dr. Alan Lee, I feel like I need to take a sip of water and a large breath because your CV is simply phenomenal. And to be quite honest, it is an absolute honor and a privilege to be able to call you a colleague, and more so to have you on tonight's episode of Conservation Conversations. I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you so much, John, for the incredible introduction. Thank you, everybody who's tuned in tonight. Really awesome to see so many of you here today, and hope to see some more of you in person at the various book launches coming up over October. So yes, I'm here to talk tonight about Birds on the Brink, and give you a little bit of background as to what led up to this. Although my name's on the book, this is really a work of a lot of people. Our list of contributors is over 100, and the list of people who contributed to the actual Red Data Book is over 130. The photographers, the writers, and everybody who made this happen, thank you, thank you, thank you. Um, and this is very much also inspired by Vernon Head and Mel Tripp, who said that there was a need to create a book which wasn't as technical as some of the Red Data books have been in the past, which presented the information and the stories of birds in an accessible format in order to be digestible to birders, conservationists, and other naturalists. So I'd like to start off with a quote here by David Attenborough, because it touches very much on how I see the world and the reasons for doing what I do, and why I think birds and the environment are so important. So I'll just read this. It seems to me that the natural world is the greatest source of excitement. It's the greatest source of visual beauty. It's the greatest source of intellectual interest, especially of interest to me as a data scientist. And it's the greatest source of so much that makes life worth living. So round of applause to David Attenborough for that. And I guess what we want to do tonight is really try and understand why focus on birds, because there is so much out there that is nature related. And I'll just share a few slides on a few of the things. There are books written on this. In fact, there's an entire book called Why Do Birds Matter? And the first is maybe if we could just reflect on an adjective that comes to mind when we see this absolutely spectacular secretary bird. For me, it's regal, it's majestic, it's an enigma, and yeah, it's threatened. A lot of this presentation draws on the photographs that were submitted to Birds on the Brink, and really a lot of the Birds on the Brink is just so beautiful because of these fantastic photographers who have shared their photos with us in order to make this publication. So thank you very much. We do put the credits on the screens where applicable. One of my personal favorite little beauties is the orange-breasted sunbird, of course, because I live in the fynbos. This one being a little bit shy, but again, just so indicative of what South Africa has to offer to the world. So let's think about emotions now. Here's a photo, historic photo from the archives of Andrea Enkel, looking at this fantastic albatross. I mean, look at that expression of absolute joy and privilege on her face. And it's experiences like this, close up with wildlife and threatened wildlife specifically, that have really inspired people to dedicate their lives to conservation. So many of my colleagues at BirdLife South Africa, in the background there, Jess Wilmot, John Kinghorn, really do this for the love of birds and the environment and the need to help conserve and protect them. Andrea features, of course, in Birds on the Brink with an absolute touching story of her observations of one of these chicks being eaten alive. I guess onto more technical matters. Birds are really important in making ecosystems work. Featuring two of my favorite birds over here from the fynbos, the Protea seedeater, Protea canary, and a Cape sugarbird. These are both birds that interact with the environment and help with seed dispersal, and in the case of the Cape sugarbird, with pollination. And there are many, many different examples. So Neisner woodpecker, another bird featured in Birds of the Brink, is an ecosystem engineer drilling holes that are utilized by other birds. Then, of course, there are the oh so important cultural significance of birds, not just to us in South Africa with this beautiful blue crane, our local bird of paradise, which features on our coat of arms. But there are other examples. So the purple-crested lory for Eswatini, southern bald ibis for Lesotho. And oh so importantly, often being on the top of a trophic pyramid, they are sentinels of biodiversity. In other words, they look out for us as we look out for them. If they're in decline, it points to big problems in ecosystems and the world around us. So the blue crane is a very good example of a bird which was actually downlisted in the last Red Data book published in 2015, but has been uplisted again due to declines of this bird in its principal population strongholds being the Overberg. This means that something is happening there, possibly agricultural intensification, possibly something else. So birds are in decline for many, many reasons. I could probably give a talk to every little inset over here, every little piece of text on why birds are in decline. And we touch on a lot of this within Birds and Birds on the Brink. We've got our red-knobbed coots, looking at a used piece of plastic. This species has been found dead in large numbers on the edge of Comfers Dam due to poisoning and botulism, degradation of our wetlands, big threat to wetland bird species. Pollution resulting in entanglement or degradation of habitats is a big problem. Agrochemicals, for instance, receiving a lot of attention now. Or deliberate poisoning. Sentinel poisoning of our vulture species, which I'll touch on later on, has led to the declines and critical status of pretty much all of our vulture species. Overfishing, a big problem for all of our seabird species, our marine bird species. All of our Benguela endemics are now threatened with extinction. The reasons are quite clear and obvious to those of us in the conservation sector. Bycatch, another big reason for the decline and the very poor status of our albatross and other pelagic species. Collision impacts with wind turbines is a growing threat. It's a reason that Cape vulture wasn't downlisted further, and that is due to projections of mortalities as wind turbines spread across the country. Persecution, deliberate, reduced prey availability, habitat degradation, invasive species, the list is a long one. So in order to quantify all of these threats on our bird species, we undertake what is known as the regional red listing exercise. And the purpose of this is quite a depressing one. It's basically to produce a relative estimate of extinction risk. And we did it regionally for the birds of South Africa, Lesotho and Eswatini. Many of our viewers will be familiar with the categories of extinction risk, which go from least concern, green in this little table, up to critically endangered, those most in danger of becoming extinct in the wild, or if there are no captive breeding populations, then permanently extinct. Quantifying these categories relies heavily on guidelines from the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, which are applied both globally and regionally. And the output has traditionally been a book. So Keith Barnes's book, published in 2000, the first official Red Data book following these guidelines, and the 2015 ESCOM Red Data Book of Birds of South Africa, Lesotho and Eswatini, edited by Martin Taylor, Fancy Peacock, and Ross Wendlis. So assessing extinction risk relies on a lot of information, either bespoke research and conservation related investigations. So we've got Linda van der Heever over here, putting a tracker on a whiteback vulture. Matthew Orlovitz and David Ellis Smith undertaking a ringing practicing exercise. But then it also extends very extensively into the realm of citizen science. So the logos on this screen over here represent the most important citizen science projects, which we use quite heavily during the red listing process, being SABAP2, coordinated water bird counts, and the coordinated avifaunal road counts. So in the center picture over here, we have David Ellis Smith with my daughter, not an ornithologist, but quite interested in practical when it comes to ringing and assisting with active research. And in the final panel, some friends from Uniondale who accompany on my coordinated avifaunal road counts across the Uniondale district. So the result was the first regional Red Data Book of Birds online, free to access from everyone, as John's already mentioned, accessible via BirdLife South Africa's webpage, extension Red Data Book. We assessed over 753 non-vagrant species, conducted 193 full assessments for any species deemed to be in serious decline, of which we determined 147 were threatened or near threatened. And in addition, we have accounts for 70 endemic or near endemic least concerned species. All of this information in the final threat categories are on the 2025 Excel checklist, which is downloadable from the BirdLife South Africa webpage. So what was the summary of this? Well, it was not good news, to put it simply. We've got the category summaries in this little table over here, but the bottom line is that in 2025, 148 species are listed as being threatened or near threatened. And this is up from 132 species listed in the Red Data Book, where we back corrected and using similar comparative measures, it was 126 species like for 2015. So nearly 40 deteriorating species, and where we've got conservation wins, 10 species featured there, and they tend to be very relative. So an example of a downlisting was the wattle crane, but it has been downlisted from critically endangered to just endangered. So that's not really a real conservation win. It just means a species with a very, very small population isn't currently declining, but it's still very much in risk of going extinction due to some stochastic events or disease getting into that population. Overall, though, the bottom line is that our species in South Africa now face a greater extinction risk than they did over a decade ago. So it's heavy stuff. I'm often asked which are South Africa's most threatened bird species, and we'll just run through the 11 which are listed as critically endangered to give an example of some of the threats and bird groups which are most impacted. So remember, critically endangered is a step away from being locally disappearing from the skies of South Africa. The first featured bird here is the Tristan albatross, which breeds on the Tristan da Cunha archipelago, notably Goch Island. We featured Christopher Jones and his adventures on that island, surveying for this bird, and it is threatened principally off South Africa's waters due to bycatch, due to longline fishing industry. Leach's storm pestrel is an interesting case study. It is still fairly common in the Northern Hemisphere, but the Duss and Dyer Island complex of our west coast are the only known location for a breeding population within the Southern Hemisphere. We've retained it on the Red Data Book because it could represent some kind of taxonomically distinct species of interest or taxon of interest. We know very little about this, and its numbers are diminishing. Southern banded snake eagle is one of our most endangered raptor species within South Africa. Used to be more extensive across KwaZulu-Natal, but various surveys suggest this has declined quite dramatically. Certainly, I didn't encounter it when I was up in Isimangaliso recently, and I was told that it used to be a fairly common feature on the power lines around the St. Lucia region. Some work by BirdLife South Africa, which attempted to track and understand the species, was not able to generate any information which would provide deep insights as to why this is declining. It's probably a combination of habitat loss and electrocutions on power lines. Tighter falcon, one of our smallest falcons, breeding in the Bladder River Canyon, a very small breeding population here in South Africa, with a range that extends into Mozambique and further north into Eastern Africa. The numbers in South Africa are declining. There are only a handful of breeding birds now. This is possibly due to competition with more common other raptor species such as Lana falcon, but overall the reasons for decline here are unclear. The Boerte's lark is one of South Africa's most important bird species from the conservation point of view. So all the other bird species have ranges, breeding ranges that extend outside of South Africa. This is the only one which has a breeding range restricted entirely to South Africa. And we've got an entire talk coming up on conservation conversations on this particular species, but combinations of habitat loss, potentially climate change, predator meso-release, various contributing factors mean that we've only got about 320 species of this bird left in the world. Blue swallow, absolute stunning swallow coming to South Africa to breed and then dispersing north into Central Africa, non-breeding season. And it's probably a fitting point now just to dovetail as to what one of the pages from Birds of the Brink actually look like. For each species account, we list its current status, in this case here, critically endangered. We provide some at-a-glance statistics for those who aren't into reading long text and would just like to know some of the basics about the species, and we list the threats. For blue swallows, this is quite a long list, including habitat fragmentation, loss of breeding sites, and a distribution map. So the distribution maps will be very different in Birds of the Brink to those you'll traditionally find in field guides. We use BirdLasser data quite extensively to model where the species is found, supplemented by photographic records on iNaturalist. And as a result, a lot of these ranges on these maps are quite restricted when compared to field guide distributions. We did try and get, for every species which was assessed during the red list, for the assessor to also write their experience with the species from multiple different angles. Steve McKean contributed an article here on his work through conservation outcomes, on working with landowners who are critically important to ensuring that this species will persist in South Africa into the future. Now into quite a long list of vultures. This is such a spectacular bird, the bearded vulture. Thank you very much, Bruce Ward-Smith, for contributing your photos to Birds on the Brink. And like many vultures, it is critically endangered due to poisoning, both incidental and deliberate. The hooded vulture, once one of Africa's most widespread vultures, stretched all the way to Western Africa, Senegal, and across its entire range. Numbers have absolutely plummeted, and here in South Africa as well. This one targeted specifically for traditional medicine use, which has led to major declines in West Africa, But also the loss of the megaherds, the big plains of zebra, wildebeest, etc., which used to be such an abundance and easy food source for our vultures, just aren't found anymore. And where these have been replaced by stock farming, the closure of open-air abattoirs in West Africa, as we've tightened up health and safety standards for processing meat in those countries, means that these guys really have nowhere left to feed either. Similar situation now for leopard-faced vulture. This is one of the species which has been uplisted to critically endangered since the last Red Data book. About 250 individuals possibly grace our skies at any one time. Really is becoming a hard vulture to see. An arid zone vulture likes to nest in the tall umbrella thorn trees, which are being targeted for charcoal. But again, like all the meat-eating vultures, also a victim to poisoning events. White-backed vulture. One of our more common vultures in southern Africa, but also absolutely devastating declines, not just outside of its traditional range, where it might even be faring a little bit better, so places around Kimberley, but also within protected areas. Some of the biggest declines have been within Kruger National Park as a result of these poisoning events, either sentinel poisoning with poachers poisoning carcasses to stop the vultures signaling that there is a kill of a rhino or an elephant, but also one of the flagship species for highlighting the dangers of lead within the environment. Chicks impacted by lead are really in poor health compared to those which have acceptable levels of lead, which is a very small percentage of the population, I'm given to understand. So this touches then on the work by BirdLife South Africa's Linda van der Heever, who's trying to tackle this problem with her team. And the featured story for whiteback vulture is by Machawe Mapalala from Eswatini. He's now a senior lecturer over there. And he was also a co-editor on the formal Red Data book of birds of South Africa, Lesotho and Eswatini. Another incredible case study of decline. White-headed vulture has always been a rare vulture over our skies, but as we see from this map over here, again from Birds of the Brink, we focus in on the map over there. The only stronghold for the species would have been Kruger National Park, but it has now become increasingly rare within those northern parts associated with the highest incidence of deliberate poisoning. So a sad story, but we also do feature a story of hope, specifically from the Peregrine Fund here, who are working quite hard with allies or potential adversaries within the traditional farming communities in Kenya and further afield in East Africa. One of the biggest surprises during the red list assessment was the number of waterbird species which have been uplisted to higher threat categories. So when we talk waterbird species, we're not just talking things like ducks, although some couple of those have been uplisted, but also a lot of the waders. Things like black stork relies on healthy riverine systems that's been uplisted from vulnerable to endangered. African marsh harrier, wetland bird species, also in decline, and lesser flamingo. The situation at Camphors Dam was absolutely crazy in terms of poisoning, water mismanagement, and as a result, that species is not bred there for years. We hear that there were also problems with the breeding grounds in Namibia associated with droughts, and the threats of salt mining in Makgadikgadi pans, the other breeding stronghold in southern Africa, was also cause for concern. A large number of albatrosses are featured in Birds of the Brink, and this is mostly due to longline bycatch and changes in the ocean environments, and now, of course, also the threat of invasive species, very specifically house mice. We do feature a number of people working on this. So from BirdLife South Africa, Andrea Ankel, who we talked about earlier, Shamiso, co-author of this book, talks about her experiences with sooty albatross. Reason Ngera works with the actual fishermen and their boats in order to mitigate the bycatch by implementing bird scaring lines and other features and hook pods. Porter's Lark. So again, featured over here as a case study of the impacts of habitat change and potentially larger landscape changes, which might be very hard to turn around. So possibly recently changes in agricultural practices, but there's a sentiment of thought which does lead us to believe that this is one of the species that used to track the herds of mega herbivores, which used to inhabit the high altitude grasslands, which are really a scarce thing now these days. But it's also a story potentially of hope. BirdLife South Africa has pivoted in order to try and save the species now with the Wakkerstrom Conservation Centre, and we would like to thank Birding Ecotours for their role in making this possible. One of my favorite bird species, being the main boss aficionado that I am, and one that I've personally followed around for hours and hours and hours, together with Krista Oswald, a PhD student who came out here and spent many years of her life dedicated to this bird species. The only real reason for declines in this species are the direct and indirect impacts of climate change. It's an island species found only on our more temperate or higher altitude mountain ranges with cooler climates. I mean, there are rocks all over the place. They're definitely on rock jumpers all over the place. And the work by Krista has shown that the species is physiologically poorly adapted to living in warmer environments, and its declines are directly linked to that. So not only that, but of course, the Venus faces threats to from alien vegetation, and the big surprise from her research was the increase in nest predation resulting from temperature, climate envelope release, specifically worm song becoming more active within the range of the species. And most of the nests which were monitored disappeared down worm slung throats. If anyone hasn't heard of the penguin crisis, well, breaking news, this is a species that's gone from vast numbers to really a situation critical, just recently uplisted globally as critically endangered, but in a way also a conservation success story possibly for South Africa. Here it is, only endangered. And the reason for that is the large number of effort that is being dedicated to saving individual birds, protecting its foraging grounds, and of course, Christina Hagen's fantastic work at the De Hoop colony to try and establish a new penguin colony. But competition from fisheries, a major problem, and that's reflected across all the other penguilla species. I mean, those of you in Cape Town wouldn't believe the Hartlaub's has now been uplisted. By all accounts, that species is not doing very well, and one of the leading reasons is persecution, but also the loss of its preferred prey. So we touch on many angles of what makes conservation work through Birds at the Brink. I can't touch on all of it, but I do like to touch on one of my favorite programs within BirdLife South Africa, which is the Empowering People program, led by Nandi Tobela over here. We featured her story together with the yellow-breasted pipits, and Nandi tells her story about Dalu, one of the BirdLife South Africa field guides, one of John's favorite people, I presume, and just the importance of empowering people to take responsibility for their environment, which has benefits for the birds that live there. He's a big fan of flufftails, but protecting the habitat around Nsekeni means also that we've got more habitat specifically for yellow-breasted pipits. This slide here just features a fantastic photo, Barry Cohn, well done. This is another one of my favorite bird species, the red lark from the Bushman Land area, where I've just come back from the Citizen Science Atlas survey last week. I didn't see the species, but it is one which just highlights again a species which currently seems to be doing okay, but where the fantastic work by the University of Pretoria and specifically Reno Kemp have highlighted how the species in this arid zone is already at its thermal limits, and any increase in temperature means the species is just going to continue to decline going into the future. Strong message within Birds of the Brink is that this isn't just a tale of doom and gloom. So from that point of view, it's always lovely uh, if you do have a chance to visit both me and Shamiso, because I'm the doom and gloom guy. As soon as people ask me about my work, I'm an unwelcome guest parties. I've been banished to the edge of the Baviaanskloof as a result. People just can't take this amount of bad news in any one go. But I'm really hoping that the good news stories which we featured here, some of the case studies of people working and dedicating their lives to the conservation of these species, will give us all hope and show us that we're not alone in trying to help all of these different species. And really, if we put our hearts and minds and money to it, conservation definitely works. So a standout example is the Cape vulture. The only species of vulture which is not listed as critically endangered was downlisted from endangered to vulnerable, and that is because of so many conservation organizations working to protect the species. So Endangered Wildlife Trust, Volpro, various vulture rescue centers, raptor rehabilitation centers. Thanks to them and monitoring of their colonies, the species has actually increased in number and seems to be currently stable. Unfortunately, still threatened due to the growing interest in the species by traditional medicine markets. Well done, everybody involved in that. I always like to feature this bird here because I don't know why, but I might have something in common with it. I like to think that we're both very handsome. But in this case here, another fantastic example of a conservation success story. And this conservation success story stretches back absolutely decades. And that is unfortunately the sort of timelines that we're looking at in order to make conservation work. So we feature Karina Pirna from BirdLife South Africa and her work monitoring the colonies around Ngula, her work sponsored by Eskom. Thank you very much. And it was first noticed that southern bald ibis was in decline by Roy Siegfried going back into the 1970s. It became a protected species. It became the subject of a lot of citizen science research, people monitoring their colonies. Through monitoring their colonies, they were able to mitigate a lot of the egg collecting, and a lot of that monitoring continues until this day. It has been downlisted from vulnerable to near threatened, so it's not yet totally in the clear. Its habitat is also disappearing due to alien vegetation infestation, and also the potential threats of climate change. Alien invasive species such as house mice and Marion are a major reason why so many of the seabird species continue to be listed as threatened within the Red Data Book. But this species here, spectacled petrel, is a great example of what can happen when you remove invasive species from their breeding islands. So they don't breed off our islands, they breed off the ones closer to South America, where invasive species have been controlled, and this species has bounded back as a consequence of that. Similarly, the black-barreled albatross, one of the only species, albatross species in our waters listed as least concern. So on that note, just a reminder of one of BirdLife South Africa's, or one of South Africa's most ambitious conservation projects, which is the Mouse-Free Marion project. If we can get this project to work, then we will be able to downlist so many species from the threatened categories they currently find themselves in. It'll be a major conservation win. And come 2035, if we've been able to pull the project off by then, it'll probably be the first time where we have a reduction in the number of species considered threatened within the Red Data Book. I really hope that happens. For those of you wondering what can be done, how you can play your part, there's a very short section within Birds of the Brink to give you a few ideas. Um, and they can be super simple. I think that a large burden of guilt often falls on our minds and then causes us to just avoid these conversations. But just doing any little thing, looking after yourself, looking after your family means that you're better positioned to look after after the environment. And birding offers such a fantastic um, well, hobby, and it's a great thing to do for your peace of mind. So joining a bird club, if you haven't already done so, is something that I'd strongly recommend. And if you're a bird club representative, you can tell them that joining a bird club is good for the environment as well as good for your own mental health. Um, on that, just a reminder about the launch events coming up later in the year. Well, later in the a couple of weeks' time, really, when Shamiso and I will be in Johannesburg and Cape Town, and hope to meet some of you there and sign some books. And if you want to find out more about those books, go to our website, BOTB, where you can find out more about those launch events. So on that note, I need to thank a lot of people. Had considered putting in a slide of the 130 people who've contributed to this book, the photographers, the authors, so many people, and also very specifically the organizations who've sponsored my position here. So Mapulo Trust, Eskom, Italtal Ceramic Foundation Trust, eCarbon Minerals, Afrit, and the First Rand Foundation. If you've got any questions, do feel free to reach out and visit the Red Data Book online and buy Birds on the Brink. And on that note, I'll hand over John and look forward to answering some questions. Thank you very much.
A phenomenal presentation indeed, Dr. Lee, and thank you so much. I see that there is numerous hand clapping emojis, and presumably this is the digital version of a standing ovation, because I'm confident that this is what you would have received had the 300 odd participants been in physical attendance this evening. Well done. And I know when I joined BirdLife South Africa in August of last year, unofficially in July, it was talk of the town in the organization that Alan was busy working on the Red Data book, and that the Birds of the Brink publication was coming from that as well. And I really couldn't quite comprehend what was going into this until I saw the physical end product of both the online Red Data book as well as this Birds on the Brink publication. It's truly phenomenal, everybody. I cannot encourage you more to go and purchase this. Just a quick reminder, if you have any questions, please pop them into our Q&A box and we'll do our best to try and answer them. But let's go straight into the thick of it. Somebody, Alan, has asked us here, um, what kind of population declines are rooted to increase in climate degradation? So, what is the trends, or sort of the percentage, presumably, is what this speaks to, that is linked to those various categories? Do we have any kind of insight into that? So, how much is, habitat loss or fragmentation contributing to decline? I suppose it'll vary from species to species, won't it?
Yeah, it will. Thank you very much for that question. So I guess we'll start with again, looking at the glass half full side of the story is that still until now, of the 750 bird species assessed, only 20% are threatened or near threatened. So, 80% of our birds are doing well. So, yay. Climate change is a complicated one because you've got both indirect, direct impacts of warming climates that a bird might not be physiologically able to deal with. The only case study that I know specifically about of those are Cape Rock Chimper and the red lark, although they're the only ones which have received so much detailed attention. But if we follow work published already a couple of decades ago by Rob Simmons, he lists a large number of bird species which tend to be the high altitude alpine restricted species, which is quite a few birds. So Ground hornbill would be ground woodpecker would be an example of those. The yellow-breasted pipit, Botha's lark. We still don't know yet to what degree climate change is impacting Botha's lark. But if you want an absolute number in terms of number of birds which are potentially threatened, this is very much going to depend on our actions and how bad climate change gets going into the future. There are some cataclysmic models that have been produced by the University of Pretoria, where they are projecting very large numbers of declines of all sorts of birds in our areas which are heated up the most, where birds are already living on the thermal edge. So in the Kalahari, for instance, things like yellow-billed hornbill is in decline, not at levels which make it threatened yet, but if the impacts of climate change keep going on, that small percentage which are currently threatened by climate change is going to be a much larger number in the future. And the interactions are really complicated as well. So Marion Island, again, is an example where climatic release of the house mice is resulting now in this, the species, the house mice, the thing eating our birds alive, in having a wider period of activity where it is able to go out there and munch on our precious seabirds. So, yeah, hopefully that's a precise and vague enough answer to satisfy that question.
Excellent. Thanks, Alan. And I see a couple of more comments before we go to another question. Some people asking where to purchase this book. Can they purchase it online? Yes, you can purchase it online directly from either the BirdLife South Africa shop for the birds, which does have an online component. Our shop manager and events manager, Claire Neal, is extremely quick in terms of processing all those orders that come through the shop. You can purchase it directly through Straight Nature, the publishers, and I believe that the book is already out on some shelves. I've seen it in some of the bookstores already. So if you have not yet got your copy, it is readily available. But if possible, support BirdLife South Africa's shop for the birds. Now, Alan, just a question that I've been thinking about personally, and I think many listeners tonight probably have thought about this as well. But why this book, and why now? I think you and I probably know the answer to that. But what in your journey as a scientist, as an ornithologist, has taken you to this point where you felt the need and the desire and importance associated with putting together a resource such as this? And why now? Why has it never been more important?
Thanks, John. Yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity to address this one. And again, it's not a short answer. I mean, I've alluded to here that my day job is an inherently depressing one, and the news that I've got to spread is hardly ever good news with all of these dire warnings about the future. And we needed to counteract that with a message of hope. So that was really important. But the reason I grabbed onto this as a project was when I had approached Vernon Head and Meltrop to get their advice as to how we could make the Red Data Book more appealing, more attractive to a general audience, given that the 2015 Red Data Book still sits in piles within BirdLife South Africa's offices. How could we capture the imagination of the general public? And Vernon was very clear that what he really enjoyed and where he thought there was a niche was in telling the stories of the researchers, the conservationists, the bird guides, and showing just the passion of certain birders and what joy they get from their birds. And also just giving insights into the lives of what might be very inaccessible stories to many of us. So the book starts with the pelagic seabird section was one of my favorite ones to read and compile and edit because I've never been to Marion Island. It's the small club of elite birders who you come out of that Marion Island all super dedicated and passionate about conservation and about that island. And I never really understood why. And reading stories like Tegan's and her works, or Eleanor and her round island adventure to look for the paddies or the sheathbills. and these journeys of adventure, just the trying conditions which went on there. But the rewards all feel so much greater as a result. It was really fantastic to read. And I think that's something really special, a story that needed to be out there. And yeah, it had to align with the actual technical Red Data book from which we had received our funding within the Science and Innovation Program to undertake this project. So it was another important reason to bring these out together.
Excellent.
Thanks.
And yeah, I think it couldn't be more of an important time for a book like this to have been published, to have been put together. And like you said, something more meaningful. And I think, when going through the book myself, it's one of the things that struck me is that you would think that because it's a natural history publication or something to do with birds and data and science and why are birds going extinct, that it would be overwhelmingly scientific and completely devoid of any kind of link to a beginner birder, perhaps somebody who's not a birder, perhaps somebody who doesn't have a vague interest in birds but is passionate about conservation. And I think that for me, that's what lends this book to being so fantastic for just everybody. And it is the ability for it to have taken the information, the science behind it, and turn it into something that is digestible for absolutely everybody and anybody. And I know in doing that, you've highlighted a couple of stories, and I might put you on the spot here, so forgive me in advance. But if you had to find or take one of those stories that you've covered in this book, that yourself and Shamiso, and I mean everybody, there are pages and pages and pages of these stories. Every single species has a story about conservationists doing work to sort this scenario out. Alan, if you had to choose a story that has touched you, deeply, deeply touched you in terms of the work that's being done to save something. One of the species in the book, many species. Is there one that stands out?
Yeah, that sure is putting me on the spot. It's always bad to have favorites, I say, as a father. But maybe from that point of view, I do have favorites. They're being stories associated with my children or contributed by my children. So, um, a really touching story is Andrea's because it really speaks to the heart of the conservation problems which we've got on the breeding islands due to the house mouse problem. But of course, there's plastic pollution. And so on Flock to Marion, where you did such a fantastic job of coordinating all the guides and showing me a few lifers and entertaining us all with the beautiful birds around us, my son and I were sitting on the decks at the start of that journey, and we got all excited by the first white thing we saw bobbing in the ocean, which we thought might be our first albatross or something because we know nothing. And of course, it was a lump of plastic or a plastic bag or something. And that went on for kilometers. Every white thing in the object was a piece of plastic, which was like a real a real letdown, but also so indicative of the problem of plastic pollution in our oceans. It's a real problem. And this reminds me then of the story which my daughter, who's a budding author, wrote about, and it's a fairy tale. So highlighting the role that storytellers and creatives have, which she then writes a story, a fairy tale about a prince and a princess who find out that there's this island where the chicks are being fed plastic and invokes the help of the local king and queen in order to address this. So that one has always been just such a source of pride for me. But we also see featured comedies. The African Finfoot story is certainly worth dipping into. Um, Inspirational stories across the board. I'm going to run out of time. I can't talk about all of them, but there we go. A couple of my favorites. Thanks, John.
I think t testament to the fact that everybody should go out and get their hands on the book, and it really is not just a drive everybody for sales. The purpose behind this book is hours of love, devotion, that's been poured into it, and I mean it's blatantly obvious as you can hear from Alan and as you heard from Shamiso in a video earlier um, uh, on in this webinar as well. Is there's hours of love, devotion, and passion here. These two individuals, the people who've shared their stories in between the pages, they've devoted their life to conservation. And Alan, your daughter's onto something there. The role that storytellers and creators have. And, I think a couple of people attending this evening, amidst the doom and gloom and obviously the conservation success stories as well. But like you mentioned as well, one can obviously get overwhelmed by all the doom and gloom news out there. And they might ask themselves, well, how can me as Jane Smith, sitting at home on my sofa. I've just returned from a corporate job, got absolutely nothing to do with conservation. How can I assist in saving these birds? I'm passionate about birds. I'm passionate about conservation. How can I assist? And you touched on a couple of those things earlier, but the principle of conservation through education, I think, is something that your daughter is knowingly or unknowingly cottoning onto when she says that the role that storytellers and creators have, which is a very important one, isn't it?
It is indeed, John. So I think it's also really important to, I guess, segue from that is that all the proceeds from this book go to conservation, go to BirdLife South Africa. So the purchase of this book isn't none of these funds are for me or Shamiso. This is all going to benefit uh, BirdLife South Africa. Um, and touching on storytelling as well, of course, we're into the age of new media. And we feature Clive Curtis and the Safari family as one of the contributors, featuring new age influences. So another aspect of conservation. So when we were planning our trip to KwaZulu-Natal, we really got into their videos, which just shared passion for nature, the outdoors, and camping in a way that really spoke to me and my family, because of course we've got kids of an age, and builds on that. And touching on your example there of corporate and social responsibility, one of our featured authors or contributors is Esther van der Westhuizen, who speaks specifically to that. It's how to leverage that expectation on large companies that they should be giving something back to communities and the environment through their corporate and social responsibility programs. If you've got any leverage there, that is a fantastic way to bring your organization into the conservation fold and genuinely make a difference by supporting so much good work.
And agreed, 100%, Alan. And there's many ways that people can get involved, that you can make an impact, and it doesn't have to be on a massive scale, but the cumulative efforts of many people, when put together individually may seem like a drop in the ocean, but once everybody's putting it all together, those little acts can equal the force of the ocean itself. So it's really, really powerful what one person's act can do, but to adopt the mentality of, well, I'm just a single person, I'm not going to be able to make an impact, I'm not going to make a difference to these birds. Well, every single one of the stories in the pages of this book is one story. And how many stories of those has it taken to make the impact that it has? So there's a living, tangible example of how many single person's individual actions have all contributed towards starting this journey of making a difference. Alan, what next for these birds? We working, hard to save them. There's people that have devoted their lives to specific species, to projects, their next biggest challenge. What's next for our birds? I mean, it is all doom and gloom, but there is a silver lining, and obviously we need to try and focus on that. Uh, but how is the situation looking for the foreseeable future? And more importantly, how long do you think it's going to take for us to make the turnaround for the trend to start looking less down and more up?
It very much depends on how many people are motivated to make a difference. So hopefully this is a catalyst to getting more people on board to help start making a difference, joining BirdLife South Africa and making donations to their favorite conservation NGOs, etc. And you'd be getting two very different answers to this question now if Shamisa was here as well. So mine, as always, like the job of delivery of the glass half empty. Here's your text on the birds and why they're all threatened. Um, And Shamisa gave an interview to 702 one of the weekends past, and it was really touching to see just the hope and positivity coming out from this new generation, Gen Z, or however you want to describe them. But I think when Tim asked her, um, a similar question to like this is, well, all of these birds are potentially savable, and this is the truth because now we've got many of the reasons for declines for these birds. We just need to start going and doing the things that need to be done in order to fix these problems. Um, and we list many of those, and we just got to get on with it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. Definitely, definitely. Um, I see there's it's been posted here in the Q&A box, Ellen, but I'm going to read it out because it is a bit of a personal story in the form of a paragraph. So bear with me here because I think that this is it's from Linda Clokey, and it's obviously a story that's been very touching to her and impactful on her. In 2005, I carried an albatross chick back to base on Marion Island that had been eaten by mice and had died in my hands. The first time I'd ever seen this cruel thing happening. As the chicks are taught to sit on the nest, sometimes with so much snow with only their heads poking out the snow, the chicks were all still sitting on their nest, but that was now 20 years ago. I then went back to Marion for 3 more expeditions working as a birder, and what a privilege. However, every single year I went, things seemingly got worse and worse. I never did see a sooty albatross that had been eaten alive, but did see many of the burrowing birds filmed eating chicks alive. It's sad that it's gotten to this stage. And everybody, the images of some of these birds, in particular the stuff coming from Marion Island, and you know, the birds that are busy getting hammered there by the introduction of alien house mice, is it really is distressing to see. It's equivalent to looking at a rhino that's had its horn hacked off. But as Eleanor so rightfully said as well, Eleanor Thompson, if we don't address these things, if we don't talk about it, if we don't open people's eyes to it, then it's just going to go swept under the rug. And there are people out there, Alan, that actually they might not know about birds, full stop, let alone the conservation crises that a small little brown bird faces in the southern Mpumalanga town of Wakkerstroom. And making sure that these individuals learn about something, begin to appreciate it, and then in appreciating it, develop this sense and need of wanting to conserve it is all part and parcel of reaching out to those who perhaps are otherwise unaware. And it seems that Linda was obviously moved by that moment on Marion Island. Ellen, is there any moment in dealing with birds in your career that's moved you? I'm talking birds and the conservation crises these birds are facing, many of the species are facing. Is there one species whose story is moving you on a daily basis? If not on a daily basis, then certainly to such an extent that it's made a meaningful impact on you in your career.
Yes, quite a few species, John. But again, I have a great love for the fynbos biome, and certainly having seen, I've been studying that since my postdoc in 2012. Watching the fynbos disappear under alien vegetation is a great personal heart sore. Watching the inappropriate fire regimes come through and rip through these mature stands of fynbos, and I'm just finished a major project trying to reassess the status of the fynbos bird species, and the results were so dire that I couldn't even, I'm not even ready to publish them yet. I'm going to go and do more surveys just to double check myself that the situation is this bad. And unfortunately, this is a group of birds which are fynbos endemics, which I suspect we're going to be seeing a bunch of uplisting come 2035, or if not in the interim with the global red listing projects. So um, watching the videos, watching the work done by Krista Oswald, and watching these cute, fluffy little chicks, a little bit like uh, these chicks on Marion Island, but probably a little more ugly. But seeing them getting eaten one after the other by the boomslang, it was like it's quite horrifying. It comes out of a horror movie, really. Uh, so yeah, I really hope that all of these birds are able to survive their various threats, so that we've got more positive stories to tell uh, next book around. I mean, we've only featured one story per bird within the book, but we're often spoilt for choice as to who to feature, and there's so many other untold stories, inspirational stories out there that that I'd really love to hear. And maybe in 10 years' time, I'll be privileged enough to be doing all this again, in which case it's my heartfelt desire or wish that I'd be able to write a book called Birds Back from the Brink, and just see if we were right and if our conservation actions have resulted in some good 10 years from now.
And I'm sure it's going to. And I look forward to the day that that publication hits our shelves. I think we all look forward to it. And yeah, excellent, truly excellent, Alan. And thank you so much for your time. Everybody, thank you so much for your questions. There are a number of questions that have gone unanswered. And I'm just asking everybody to not be disgruntled. In the interests of time, I'll make sure that these questions find their way to Dr. Lee and Shamiso so that they can answer them and get back to you with regards to anything that you wanted to know stemming from tonight's presentation. Perhaps just a final call to action from myself, the team at BirdLife South Africa, Dr. Lee, and Shamiso, those involved in the publication of Birds on the Brink, is that every single person here can make a difference. Conservation isn't something reserved for scientists. Every single individual out there can be a conservationist. And it's our job. We, as human beings, are the most powerful species on this earth. And yet, we do not use necessarily all of our time, that power, to bring about the necessary change that is needed to save this planet. So, if anything from tonight, take away the stories of despair, the stories that are jerking tears from your eyes, but also take away the hope and the stories, the conservation success stories that have come from efforts across the world. And know that you, as an individual, and your contributions are certainly not going unnoticed and will not go unnoticed. Alan, any final remarks from you on behalf of the team at Birds on the Brink, the Science and Innovation team at BirdLife South Africa?
John, I'd like to just say thank you very much. Thank you very much for all the support from the fantastic audience here today. But you summed it up so well that I think that this is a good place to end.
Excellent. Thanks, Alan. And I see again we have a good number of virtual standing ovation and emoji clapping hands. So second standing ovation for the evening tonight, Dr. Lee. Well done. Excellent, everybody. Well, that concludes that. And on behalf of myself, Jessica Wilmot, who has been behind the scenes, posting links, answering questions, and engaging with all of you, as well as on behalf of Dr. Lee Shamiso in her absence, and the whole team at BirdLife South Africa, we thank you for supporting Conservation Conversations, for supporting BirdLife South Africa, and of course, supporting conservation of our country's birds. We greatly, greatly appreciate it. Dr. Lee, I will see you at the Johannesburg book launch in a number of days.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a lovely evening and see you on the next episode of Conservation Conversations.